Okay, so I always knew it was that guy, you know, always knew. From a young age, it was very different. Always knew, you know. Probably the first instance that this was made known to me was I was with my mom and we were meeting teachers. I think it was like fourth or fifth grade. Before the school year, there's a day and you meet the teachers. I was with my mom or meeting the teachers. And I remember being there. I remember watching all the other kids, and all the other kids were very nervous. And I wasn't nervous, you know. But then I ended up being nervous because they were nervous. It was one of those things like, oh, I'll act nervous, but I'm not nervous. It was one of those things. I was like, that was the first instance. It was like, other people are different, you know. Like, why are they nervous to meet their teachers and be around their parents, etc. Probably sort of the next couple instances was like, I always knew it was that guy, you know. Like, it takes a certain mentality, a certain temperament in order to like take a spear. I mean, hypothetically, like you think about in the ancient days, they would have these battles and they would have spears and swords. It takes a certain mentality to take a spear and jab it through another human in a battle, hypothetically. And some people have that temperament and ability to do that, and others don't. And others would freeze in that moment or pause or think about it, and then they themselves would get killed. Because it just takes a split moment, you're dead. And that's like in military like standards or whatever. And even nowadays, like you take a gun. But I like the spear example. It's more intimate, as they say. Even the Joker would say that. With that being said, other people would notice certain things that I do, and they'd be like, wow. They'd be like, wow, that's great. That's a great thing. Wow, that's super cool. Wow, that's awesome. It's like super like strong, super whatever. But I would say like, I knew I was that guy, you know. I know I'm that guy. And then, but it's like, again, everyone's quote unquote that guy, but when they're put in that situation, how do they perform? You know, that's sort of what I'm getting at. And so it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm that guy. And then it's another instance to actually like perform and like show up, win, essentially. So there's a story, and change the names, but it's the middle of the night. It's like midnight, you know, 8 p.m., midnight, 1 p.m., 1 a.m. And I'm out. I'm in the suburbs. I'm with two other guys. And before we went out, we were going to go around the neighborhood. And they got rollerblades. I don't like rollerblades. They're not good. I don't like it. I don't like it's difficult to learn. And then once you learn, it's really not, you can learn it, but it's like you strap basically wheels to your feet and you're basically stuck having wheels on your feet. It's not, you gain mobility, but you also lose the ability to like step and walk. And when you walk, it's kind of awkward. It's just, versus a bike, you have really way more control because you have brakes on your handlebars. And you can get off your bike and you can walk around and look at stuff, etc. You have more mobility on a bike versus rollerblades. Again, I like bikes more than rollerblades. And so I had rollerblades, they had rollerblades, but I went on a bike because I wanted more control, because I'm that, again, intellect genius. I didn't want to see if I was good enough to ride rollerblades. I didn't want to, test the limits to, and quote unquote, maybe fall or whatever and hurt myself. Again, I like a bike. I think a bike is way better, more control. You can even go faster and feel more safe versus rollerblades. Again. And so we're going around, and on this particular hill, it's very steep, and you can go easily like 30 to 55 miles per hour down this hill on wheels. like on a bike or rollerblades. And so I remember I was right here, and I didn't want, because they were like, one guy was like a regular. He rollerbladed for like a couple of years. Another guy was like again, it's like one of his first few times rollerblading. So he was like, again, wobbling around, like trying to like learn how to move fast, how to stop, how to brake. And I see this, and so I kept my distance because I didn't want them to run into me, and I didn't want me to run into them, because we were going pretty fast down these hills. And so I'm waiting there, and I would go last, but so the first person goes, and then the second person goes, and I wait like 10 to 30 seconds because I wanted a good enough gap in between me and that person. And it's like in the middle of the night, so it's like there's not a lot of cars, so you don't really have to worry about other cars. But on this particular, there was one truck that went by but didn't make a right. So on this street, you can go straight or you can go loop around. And so it was like this truck just went this way, we went the other way down this massive hill. And remember, I waited like 10, 30 seconds. I went and I started going down this hill. It went pretty fast, like 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. And I remember I seeing guy number 2, the inexperienced guy. I remember seeing him on the ground, like he fell. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I was like, and you can sort of in those moments, you can like feel in your stomach or whatever, like something's wrong. And it's another reason why these atheists are kind of retarded. But there are certain things that you can feel within your stomach, like your gut instinct or whatever, when you can know when something's wrong or not right, or something just feels off. You can feel that. It's kind of like sense, and obviously it's like your soul like jumping out, like, oh, something's wrong. But I remember feeling in my stomach like, oh, something's wrong, And so I went to try to figure out what happened. And the guy's on the floor, and I remember pulling out my phone, and the guy looks at me, he goes like, don't tell my parents. And I remember being shocked. I was like, that's the first thing you think of? You just fell, and you probably just, and I didn't know like how bad he was hurt, but like that's the first, I remember being like shocked, but I didn't tell anyone. I remember putting my phone away. I was like, why? Like, why? That's the first thing you think of? And then he tells us, he gets up and he's like, my arm like really hurts. And we found out later that he fractured his arm, like he broke his bone, he broke his wrist. I think he fell right on his wrist and broke it. But it's like he remember telling us, I think he took off the rollerblades, but I think we're walking back home, and he tells us, he's like, my arm really hurts. So I was like, oh. And I remember asking him, like, is it broken? Like what do you think? It's like, it really hurts. It's like, and he started telling us it was like fuzzy, like all like heightened. He's obviously filled with adrenaline, because you get a lot of adrenaline from like just bombing hills or whatever, but like, again, like crashing into something, you're like filled with adrenaline. He said like it felt like tiny pricks around his whole arm. It was all fuzzy and red and hurt. And so I'm like, I was thinking you probably did break it. I'm thinking like he most likely broke it, which sucks. Again, a lot of pain. And so I'm thinking, we get like 3/4 of the way there, back home. And I remember looking up on YouTube, like how to make a sling. And so I go, figure it out, watch some YouTube videos. In this one video, like there's a medical sling, and they take a fabric and they just wrap it around their arm. That's the sling that everyone knows of. I didn't have any medical fabric, and so I'm like, this is not gonna work. And then I found another video, and they take a sweatshirt, like a long sleeve sweatshirt, and then they wrap and they make a sling out of that. So I watched that video. I figure out how they did it. They wrap it and they put the arm. Anyway, you can watch the video if you're curious about that. So I watched that. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So I go. Either I make the sling there, or when we get home, I grab the shirt. I grab the sweatshirt, and I make the sling on his arm that hurt, that he fell on. And I make the sling. I remember making the sling very tight. And here's some physics for you guys, some medical physics. So when you make a sling, you want to make sure that the arm is like 90 degrees and that the arm's resting and at 90 degrees. So it's usually like right here, and you want the arm like right here. You want a 90-degree elbow and right here. And you want the fabric to be around the wrist, mostly like right here, a little bit down the wrist. You want most of the fabric right here, and then that will tie it to like your shoulder. And so it would lift up your arm, because instead, if you don't do that, then your arm falls down, and that's where your arm gets messed up. But if you have your arm like this and you sling it, you're usually pretty good to go. And so I sling his arm. I remember doing it very tight. I remember I had to loosen it a little bit because I knew he was about to go to bed, and I didn't want the sling getting messed up, and I didn't want his arm getting even more messed up because it was broken. Like when your bones break, you want to like put bandages around it and make sure that like they're in the proper place so your bones can like fuse together, because your bones can fix themselves. Shout out to God's creation, but like provided that they're put in the proper position. What most people do is that they leave their arm like this and they wait a day or two, and then they go to the doctors. And then when they're at the doctors, then they have to do surgery and they have to re-break the arm in order to correctly make the correct alignment, because they have to make the wrist perfectly level with the hand. And so they break it again and then they do it. But because, and this was later, I found out later, but because I made that sling and I made it tight, he went to the doctors and they did not have to re-break the arm because of what I did. And then in that moment, I was like, man, I'm the guy. I'm that guy, you know? So because of me, because of my sling, he didn't have to get his arm re-broken in order for them to do the surgery. They could just do the surgery, insert metal plates, and then get healed, and eventually take the metal plates out. I'm pretty sure, I don't know the specifics, but it was better that I made that sling. And so I was like, in that moment, I was like, I'm that guy, you know? And it's almost like I have like this private thing. I'm not like I don't go around boasting, but it's like internally I know I'm that guy. I'm like, I did, you know? I don't go off the rooftops and go like, I'm that guy, but I just know eternally that I'm that guy. And so I remember doing that, and that was like one instance of where I go, I'm that guy, you know? And so that was a cool little instance that you could, this is why I like life so much, is like talk is cheap. Like you can say, oh, I can do this and that, but it's like when you're put in that situation, like what do? You know? The other guy, he didn't even think to make a sling, you know? But I was thinking, and I thought to make a sling. It's like, how do we fix this situation? You know what I mean? But it was pretty cool. Pretty cool instance. And of course, it's unfortunate that the guy broke his wrist. He probably should have ridden a bike like me. But anyway, that guy can figure out his own problems. But it was like an instance of which I'm like just winning, you know? I'm like, and then with me personally, like I sit in silence a lot. I'm like, I'm that guy, you know? Like you can have like, I'm that guy and this is why, you know what I mean? But I just enjoy that story. I think about that, you know? It reminds me of vaguely, it's like a vague thing, but when Trump got shot in the ear and he's bleeding, and I think Putin, like a couple days later or a day later, was like many people, he's like, even talks to like many people like say they talk tough, they act tough, but to be in that situation and then to like put your fist up and like still be like fight, it was a good moment to show people and show yourself that like, yeah, like he's willing to go to the end, to death, in order to like prove his point, you know? There are some people that are tough, There are some people that, were willing to go to the end to prove their point. And so that was a good instance. And then Putin himself was like that was cool. And then Mark Zuckerberg, he's like, that was badass what Trump did. And it was like, me personally, I was like, that was cool what he did. Like, to get shot, man, you get shot at. Like, most people like hide, run away. But for him to just like, anyway, some say it was staged. If it was staged, I don't know. It's very difficult to fake that reaction that you have to have. And so let's say it was staged. Anyway, for Trump to have that demeanor on your face, it's very difficult to like have that demeanor on your face. And then the 2 days after, you look at Trump's face and you look at like, he's definitely like, and he thanks God. He's like, thanks God for saving him, etc. Because he has to, because he's a believer. I don't know if he's Christian, but I think he definitely believes in God. And it was just like a great moment. But like the 2 days after, like you see him out and like his whole demeanor's changed. Like he's way more soft. And it's kind of difficult to explain. He's way more like, and he's like forgiving of people and like forgiving the shooter, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2 days, 3 days, then he does a press conference and he gradually gets back into like I would say like the regular Trump. But it was a good moment to like show people, and I think that moment, that's when he won the presidency again. But anyway, it's like we say these things and then we get put in this situation, and then it's how you act, whether you perform or not. And if you perform, then you're that guy.